Thank you so much, Dr. Sweetser. Well, hello everyone. My name is Bridget Cole, and this is Rick Moore. And today we would like to share with you all the results of our online experiment, where we studied how the effects of inconsistent messaging from an organization might affect that organization's reputation and might further affect the public's knowledge of that message topic. So we use situational crisis communication theory to see how the public attributes a certain level of responsibility onto an organization in times of crisis. So in our experiment scenario, and this might sound very familiar to you all, we look at how, we look at how the CDC responds to a misinformation crisis around the Johnson & Johnson vaccine booster, and how them inconsistently responding to this message might create a new crisis. Specifically, how this inconsistent messaging might affect the organization's reputation, credibility, trustworthiness, and organization public relationships. We further go on to see how that inconsistent guidance might affect the public knowledge of the message topic, in this case, the COVID-19 situation. So, when we look at inconsistency, we also have seen how inconsistent and contradictory messaging has affected past organizations as well. So we look back in 2001 at the anthrax crisis, in which the CDC contradicted past other media reports, as well as downplayed a lot of the risks of anthrax inhalation, and all that contradictory messaging really negatively impacted the CDC's reputation at the time. So looking back to our current study, we look at a lot more recent times in which the COVID-19 pandemic has a lot of ever-changing information, and how the CDC must update the public on recent information, even when it seemingly contradicts the older information. So from there, I'll leave it to Rick to explain how we conducted our experiment.
Yes, thank you. So thanks, Bridget. So with our study, we did a online experiment using a sample population of graduate and undergraduate students from San Diego State University. We used the Summon system to handle informed consent and the administration of our experiment. So we had a sample of 295 undergraduate students and graduate students. Of note, 96% of these students had been required to get the COVID vaccine per San Diego State guidance. 4% either declined to disclose their vaccine status, got an approved exemption, or had a treatment, or not a treatment plan, but a testing plan in order to come to campus. So with the beginning of our experiment, we had 3 experimental stimuli in the form of social media posts. The CDC made an announcement explaining that the Johnson & Johnson booster would be available and highly recommended for people that had gotten the Johnson & Johnson COVID vaccine. The second stimulus is where an individual user on Facebook made a post containing misinformation that a dear friend had gotten blood clots and was hospitalized as a result of the Johnson & Johnson booster. So that's the misinformation component. The CDC then had to come back in the third social media post saying the risks of getting blood clots or adverse reaction is 1 in a million. There will not be a pause to the booster, contrary to what individuals have said via social media, basically staying consistent throughout their messaging. From there, we broke down our participants into 2 groups: the experimental or inconsistent CDC condition, and then the control cell, which was the consistent group. With the inconsistent or the experimental group, we showed a 4th social media post of the CDC reversing themselves, contradicting their previous statement, saying, out of an abundance of caution, there will now be a pause to the administration of the Johnson & Johnson booster. You can go to this website to check any adverse symptoms that you may come down with after the booster. The control group saw only a blank screen. So we wanted to look at inconsistency in response and how that impacted people. Once we had the completion of our stimuli, we brought all groups back together and asked a series of scale questions based on their perceptions of the CDC's credibility, trustworthiness of the CDC, general knowledge of the participants of the COVID vaccine and the booster and the CDC in general. Finally, we looked at organization-public relationships and how the how the stakeholders perceived, how the participants perceived stakeholders' organizational relationship with the CDC. So with that, I'll turn the mic over back to Bridget to discuss our results.
Thank you, Rick. So in our results, we compared the averages between these two participant groups using t-test and ANOVA to find that with reputation, credibility, trustworthiness, and organization public relationships, there was actually no significant difference between groups based on inconsistency. Now, the fact that we see no significant relationship here is actually a good thing. As you can see, especially in COVID-19, there is always ever-changing information. There's always a need to update the public with the newest information, even when that information seems contradictory to older information. The fact that updating the public on new, if not inconsistent information, does not significantly affect that reputation is a good thing. Some other results that we find in our study include this idea of knowledge. For our study, we separated knowledge into the ideas of actual knowledge and perceived knowledge. With actual knowledge, we use a knowledge check to see how much people know about the COVID-19 situation, including the CDC and the COVID-19 vaccines. Here we found that there's actually no significant difference between the inconsistent and consistent groups here. What makes this result interesting is when we compare it to the results from the perceived knowledge, in which those who saw an inconsistent CDC were more likely to perceive their knowledge as being less. They reported that they were less knowledgeable and less familiar with information regarding the COVID-19 vaccine. The fact that they perceived their knowledge as being less also means that they felt the accuracy of the knowledge they knew was lower and therefore were very uncertain on how much they could act upon it, as seen with past research. So the fact that even though they knew the same, they did not think they knew the same and therefore were very uncertain about their knowledge is very much due to this inconsistency seen in a reputable organization like the CDC, in which that uncertainty really influences the public's understanding of how much they feel like they can act upon. So from there, I'll hand it back to Rick to further explain what these results mean.
So when we think about Coombs and Holliday and situational crisis communication theory, we look at emphasis on if you see rumors or misinformation, you attack the information that's incorrect, you deny it, use a denial strategy, and you put out accurate information to your stakeholders so they can make informed decisions on how to resolve the crisis. So with that and the inconsistencies and uncertainty surrounding the pandemic, one might think that PR practitioners may be hesitant to go back on guidance that they maybe put out a week or a day ago to cause, like Dr. Sweetser said, whiplash with information and general uncertainty. We found with our study this is not the case. With practitioners having to retract their previous statement and put out something that's more accurate, we found they should not hesitate to do so. It's the key purpose of the crisis is to get through it. We didn't find a significant effect on organizational credibility, which is fortunate. As Bridget did mention, there was a bit of a discrepancy between perceived and actual knowledge. So inconsistent messaging does have a cost, and your stakeholders may not take away the same or be comfortable or confident with the information that they take away, especially in an evolving public health crisis. Information is changing on a weekly basis. So there will be something that you must be cognizant about as you plan your communications. When we think back to historically, we mentioned the anthrax crisis. In 2014, the Ebola crisis in the United States and Africa, CDC spent most of their initial time talking about things on a certainty level. They said if public health practitioners and hospitals merely carry out their infectious disease protocol, there's not going to be an outbreak. That went out the window when there was the first Ebola-related death and 2 nurses who came down with the disease. They had to immediately shift messaging towards these are the symptoms of Ebola, this is what you need to be looking out for. Our scholarship said they should have been doing that from the beginning. So it's incumbent on PR practitioners to put out the most up-to-date guidance as possible when they have it and when they understand it. We do note a couple of limitations to our study with a small sample size of university graduate and undergraduate students who all had to get the vaccine or an approved exemption before they could access campus. Did that affect the way they responded? That's something that we considered. In addition, due to the prolonged pandemic, do these participants already have a strong positive or negative perception of the CDC before they even see our stimulus, before they even continue with our scale questions. That's something that we looked at. Regarding future research direction, we'd like to see one of these studies conducted in the international context. We had a lot of US-centric research that we took for the purposes of our study. Is it different in an overseas or an international context? In addition, something we didn't focus on during our study was, do people find the misinformation and the misaligned users, do they find their information more credible than a government organization or somebody of authority? It's something that another perspective we would want to see. Bottom line for our study, we encourage PR practitioners, even if you are going to put out information that may change or may be something you said differently from yesterday, you need to put out the accurate guidance so people can do what they need to do, make informed decisions, save lives, and carry on with the crisis response. That concludes our presentation, and we're happy to take questions. Thank you.